I am delighted to welcome back our co-hosts for this event, Sam Turner from the HVM Catapult and Tim Minshall from the Institute for Manufacturing. Sam, Tim, over to you.
So I think if I've got it right, I'm just going to start off before handing over to Sam. So thank you very much, Rosa. I think what's really good about today is it's shown what the UK Manufacturing Forum is really about, which is to bring together this community, which is an important step. Every year we should be doing it, but we should be doing more. And the other thing that's been really useful is this role of sharing information on the latest thinking, the latest activities. But the third bit is engaging to have impact, to make a difference, to do something. And so what we heard from Mike and Alice is a lovely example of that, where a thing was identified, work was done, it's delivered back the recommendations to improve things. What we're seeing now, if we take it up to a slightly different perspective, is that there's been all of these strategy activities, road mapping activities across many government agencies, across the Catapult, across universities, all doing a great and valuable job. And from that, from these strategies, we can see pressing, urgent challenge areas. But there've also been, particularly in the last 12 months, lots of things emerging that need to be accelerated very rapidly. And so what we're going to mention briefly now is the way in which we want to engage the community around 5 particular challenge areas or hot topics. And so there's these, what I'll do is I'll just give a very brief overview and then Sam will talk through the specifics of each one. So if we can just jump please to the next slide, thank you very much. They're pretty self-explanatory, but what's I think these represent is a very useful way the UK Manufacturing Forum can work. As I say, from following an intended strategy, it's clear there are things we need to do, but also we've got to respond urgently to some very pressing things. So of course, it's not surprising that a big chunk of this relates to sustainability and another big chunk relates to digital, and of course, how they connect. And so there is the Fly Zero activities, all the activities around digital twins, the particular activities around how we accelerate the development and deployment of industrial digitalization technologies, strongly linked to Made Smarter. There's then this issue that was mentioned earlier about the progress the UK is making towards net zero, and kind of, as was mentioned by another speaker, kind of done some of the easy bits first, but how do we do the very difficult bits? How do we really work out what's going on? So that fourth hot topic is particularly important. And then this idea of linking together the idea of design and make in the context of net zero. So that's kind of how we've ended up here. And these are the 5 things on which we think we're going to focus the next step of activities, which will be spread out over the next few months. And you'll all be invited to engage with different parts of that. And to explain how that's going to happen, I'll now hand over to Sam.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, great scene set. It's been a great number of discussions so far today. I find it really interesting. And yeah, the point here is how do we build on this community and get some real tangible outputs and contributions from all of us? One thing I would add to the 5 topics we've got here, I think we'd probably also add a workshop just to reflect on the session we've just heard from Mike and Alice on the recommendations from last year's work on the funding landscape. So a chance to explore those as a follow-on workshop as well, we may add to the list for the new year. And as I said at the outset, we'd hope to consolidate the outputs of all these hot topics into a UKMF review, hopefully the start of an annual review that we can publish each year. So if you'd like to move on to the next slide, please, I'll talk you through the first of these on net zero emissions flight. So you will have seen, I should think, in the government's 10-point plan, the commitment to jet zero, and also the ATI have funded a programme on Fly Zero, looking at zero emissions flight. You can see here the need, I think, is well understood in terms of the sensitivity for the aerospace sector. We have 3.8% of EU emissions in 2017 related to aerospace. So there's a real need to accelerate the decarbonisation of aerospace, and it's something that the sector, certainly in the last 12 months, has been a real heightened sensitivity and focus in this area. So we'll for each of these set workshops, we'll bring in a keynote speaker just to set the scene, hopefully somebody from the Fly Zero programme. And really it's a chance then to look at what can we as the manufacturing research innovation community do to contribute to addressing these challenges. So it relates to the Airbus recent announcements as well on zero emissions and the ATI Fly Zero program, and of course the hydrogen-based aircraft concepts that are presented in this picture here from Airbus. So the output to the workshop is really to come up with recommendations in areas where we believe as a community we can contribute and feed in to the Fly Zero program run by ATI. So looking particularly at areas such as fuel cell systems for propulsion, electrical motor design, hydrogen and cryogenic storage. We probably could add ammonia onto that as well. Fuel distribution systems, aircraft design, validation and testing. These are the areas where we believe there's the most opportunity to contribute, and also been drawn out the road mapping activity I referred to earlier today. So we haven't set the dates for these yet. We're planning to start some of them in January, but January, February time, the workshops will be holding. Some of them may end up being 2 workshops as well, so reflecting on the format. You should have all had a chance already to on registration to select those that you're most interested in, and we'll also have some follow-up to make sure we've got the right attendees and the right workshops moving forward. So on to the next workshop and slide, please. So digital twins. Now this is an interesting area that means a lot of different things to different people. And one thing we're aspiring to do here is try and tie down what do we really mean by digital twins. There's been some real traction. These hot topics are not only important challenge areas, but also areas where we've got some traction, where there's either policy or funding programs maybe coming into place nationally. And there's certainly, Stuart talked about digital twins earlier in his talk, and we see some real traction in UKRI now around putting some sort of digital twin program in place. There's been a big pull towards digital twins for infrastructure, maybe transport infrastructure for the UK. So the vision we would have here is towards digitalisation of Britain is looking at a transformational digital twin program, looking at workforce, infrastructure, manufacturing, of course, as well, being an important part of that, which could sometimes get lost. And then looking at how we can deliver impact through major programs. For example, things like Tempest for defence, offshore wind, transition to hydrogen. So how do we build a digital twin infrastructure, a backbone that can then deliver value into the different national programs? The asterisk indicates areas where we have government-led funding, so there's a chance to perhaps have a greater influence than you might have on a normal commercial market-driven opportunity. So strong pull within government and UKRI, and I believe there's a real opportunity for this community to come together and help to provide input, direction, and well, ideally we get some clarity on what we mean by digital twin and where the opportunity lies. So the next slide, please, just looks at what we would deliver with our outputs. I've referenced here a report that's been produced from the MRC, one of our centres, on untangling the requirements of digital twin, and there's a link to that report at the bottom of this slide. The slides will be circulated afterwards, so please go and have a look at that report, trying to lay out a bit of a framework. But something in this workshop we want to do really is ultimately create a white paper output that we can feed into UKRI and consider the following: how will we work through the development of a digital twin? Explore the opportunity to create a common UK methodology and a taxonomy, I think, around digital twins, the different layers that we're working to. So a common definition. Digital twins become a bit of a buzzword in the catch-all. If we can get a common framework, maybe a simulation or discrete event of a factory perhaps isn't a digital twin, it's the fusion of the modelling and the real life data. Define some use cases and the scale and component architecture. Think about interoperability challenges, which we can make recommendations where any efforts for government funding can act and intervene. And also think about things like cybersecurity and other functional and non-functional requirements. So we'd expect a white paper and also build a community, perhaps an ongoing network that might live beyond the workshops that we launched earlier in the first quarter next year. So please let us know if you'd like to get involved with those, and move on to the third topic for our workshops. Another digital related one. It's a busyish slide, but we're trying to address 2 challenges here. One is around how do we accelerate technology creation, digital technology creation for manufacturing in the UK, and also accelerate diffusion of that technology. And this links into Made Smarter ICF programme and the recent competition that's been launched for digital innovation hubs. There's actually a pilot for smart factory hubs that have been run through HVM Catapult. And certainly in the pilots, and I think the overall concept for these hubs is to target manufacturers and technology providers. So manufacturers, we see there's a real challenge in terms of the UK being behind the curve in terms of deployment of digital and automation technology. The chart there at the top of the right-hand screen shows not even the UK featuring in the top 15 in terms of, it's the World Robotics Forum, investments in robotics technology, for example. So whilst there's been an increase of 5% in installation last year, in the UK, we're still 10% of the total installation that Germany made in the same period. So we are quite a way behind our peers, and we're trying to accelerate that. And one of the things we recognise is there's a challenge around understanding, maybe moving away from a tech push language, thou shalt adopt the technology of Industry 4.0 for business, and think more about how we demonstrate these technologies solving real problems. So we'd like to explore how effectively we do that. Innovation hubs we see as a means of demonstrating tech solutions to real problems in an open access environment, and equally accessing or incentivizing and stimulating a growth in the manufacturing technology provider market, particularly digital technology providers. So UK currently has 1% share of the global manufacturing tech market. Apologies for the typo there. It's the biggest tech sector in Europe, third in the world. So we've got this mixed match between our manufacturing technology footprint and our tech sector. And actually we're seeing this trend increasingly where the expertise and know-how, the differentiating opportunities embedded increasingly in the systems that we deploy, and maybe less so in the manufacturing engineers who deploy them. So this relatively small footprint we have in the UK for manufacturing technology is a concern. And actually our manufacturing output is starting to normalise down to the same, to be closer to our total manufacturing technology footprint. The biggest 4 nations in the world in terms of manufacturing output are also the biggest 4 providers of manufacturing tech. So it's something we feel we need to reset. So within these, the challenge area here we want to explore is how can we do this effectively through innovation hubs or other means to attract new talent and digital tech players into the manufacturing landscape. And also we see that disruption we're seeing in product technology can create an opportunity for new manufacturing technology solutions to come to bear. So on the next slide on this one, we'll look at how can we address this through innovation hubs and maybe other vehicles. So a workshop to explore particularly how the academic community can come together to address these. So accelerating the uptake of IDTs from UK manufacturers, demonstrating solutions to real problems, providing an environment to rapidly test and develop solutions, and signpost to expertise across the wider landscape we have represented here today. And also catalyse a new manufacturing technology supply base, so providing an environment to rapidly test, iterate new manufacturing technology on real use cases before taking them to market, and demonstrating that tech to potential partners and customers, the intentions of the hubs. And we'd like to explore how do we do that? How do we bring technology not just from the current tech sector, but out of the academic footprint and spin outs? So outputs from this workshop will be recommendations to the Made Smarter Innovation Hub pilot and to the UKRI team on how we provide effective services to manufacturers and technology providers in connectivity between research centres, innovation hubs, to deliver the most successful outcome here. So on to the next workshop topic. So the last 2 both relate to net zero again, and particularly into net zero in manufacturing. So a Bayes report in 2017 showed that 15% of UK emissions, territorial emissions related to manufacturing. We think if actually you consider consumption emissions, which would account for manufactured goods overseas consumed in the UK, and also the manufacturing footprint or shadow across some of the other sectors such as transport and energy, that it could be arguably up as high as 30%. So it's a big part of the emissions problem, and it's not in the 10-point plan. There's not a real focus yet on how we address manufacturing emissions at a national level. And there's a role for this community to play, I think, in helping to address that. One of the challenges or risks that we see is that if we don't recognise the size of the opportunity and problem associated with manufacturing emissions, and we don't account for them appropriately, we can, and Richard referred to this in his talk earlier, we can make progress, apparent progress on our emissions by offshoring our manufacturing footprint. That's not an outcome we want to see, and it's contrary to the levelling up agenda, a growth agenda that Richard also talked about earlier. So we need effective ways for accounting for and tracking carbon emissions through supply chains. And we want to be able to get some buy-in across sectors, even across borders and trade deals we may be putting in place to make sure that we don't inadvertently offshore our UK manufacturing footprint, but actually we incentivise UK manufacturers to invest in decarbonisation and become a destination, a market-winning opportunity through having a low carbon manufacturing footprint for individual companies as a nation as a whole. So this workshop is trying to understand how do we effectively account for, measure and track CO2 emissions through supply chains and the product life cycle in an auditable manner. So we'd like to explore that in this workshop, and also it would feed into a piece of work that is happening across the Catapult network, working with the HVM Catapult, Energy Systems Catapult, Offshore Renewable Energies, and Digital Catapult, all looking in this space about how can we look at accounting and tracking emissions, as well as the recommendations on the technologies. There'll be policy recommendations here as well. Okay, and the final workshop topic is also again related to net zero. This is the bigger piece really around, we call it net zero design and make. I've mentioned that the headline of potentially up to 30%, certainly 15% at the lower end of UK carbon emissions due to manufacturing. We want to reduce those in the right way by decarbonising and maybe even growing our manufacturing footprint, but whilst reducing our carbon footprint. The graphic to the right shows a typical generic manufacturing life cycle representing from raw materials extraction in a linear economy through materials processing, subcomponent manufacture, sub-assembly, full system assembly, and the through life operation, and end of life, recycle, dispose, reuse. And you see here the opportunity to create circular channels by recycling material, potentially back into materials processing, or reusing components at the component manufacturing level. And within here is different interventions required at each stage. And there's also emissions at the logistics and transport elements as well. So there's a number of solutions, interventions we can help to enable, develop and diffuse across the manufacturing life cycle at all these stages, different interventions required. And it's not simply around electrification or decarbonisation of energy supply. There's a number of other interventions required as well. So how do we address these challenges? This is what the workshop is going to focus on, and ideas that can feed into partly again across Catapult piece of work, but equally into various UKRI initiatives. So the final slide on the these topics, we'll look at the outputs from here. So it will feed into a cross Catapult piece of work. The broader UK manufacturing research and innovation community, we think this is becoming the overarching challenge we need to address, and it's been touched on a number of times today. And I think this community working with industry can really help to address the problem, and already doing a lot to do that individually, but joining up our efforts, I think, would be quite powerful. And the outputs here would be identification of these research innovation opportunities across the manufacturing life cycle, maybe launching potential projects, and feeding into an Innovate UK and cross Catapult net zero roadmap as outputs from these workshops. So again, the last two sets of workshops will happen certainly, probably start late January, Feb. They're looking to conclude recommendations into the cross Catapult piece of work in March, but they would have a life beyond perhaps that cross Catapult report that's going to be produced. So that's the quick run through the 5 topics. If we can go on to the final slide. Yeah, this is really, I mean, it's trying to build on the great work we did last year together, I think, on the recommendations that Mike and Alice have taken us through. That could well be a 6th workshop as well. But looking at how can we harness the expertise here and the energy and creativity of this community to deliver some tangible recommendations and outputs to industry and government alike. So please, can you confirm your interest in the workshops? You should have had a chance to do that when you registered, but we're following up offline as well to make sure we get the right people to the right workshops. There's a questionnaire that's going to be following as well. In there, you can also pass comments on the landscape recommendations, the piece of work that Mike and Alice have presented on, and maybe make a note if you'd like to join a follow-on workshop early in the new year. And that really concludes this session. A little different to the past ones. I'm afraid I can't offer you access to the bar and meals that we normally put on, but hopefully we'll get back together physically next year, probably with a hybrid of this kind of virtual and workshop type format and the physical get-togethers that we've operated in the past. Really pleased that you've all managed to join us today and stay with us, most of you, to the end of the session. And it's a chance for us to really say farewell to an exceptional year, I think, as Dick framed in his outset, and look forward to quite an exciting year in 2021, where there's huge opportunities for us as a community to really impact and influence some of the rapid change we're going to be seeing around the manufacturing and engineering world, and hopefully a turn to some normality, whilst perhaps retaining some of the good things we've seen adopted this year. So with that, I'll hand you back to Rosa for the final closing remarks. Thank you, folks.
Tim, thank you very, very much indeed. As you say, an exceptional year, and what an event to bring it to a close. Thank you very, very much. to all of our wonderful speakers this morning. I think you have really helped to chart the environment in which we are all operating extraordinarily well. Really, really useful presentations. And I'm quite certain that many of us will be referring back to them when we receive them in the follow-up comms after this event. Particular thanks, I think, are due to a number of people who helped bring together today's event. Jess and Emma at VoiceBox, thank you to you for making sure that we had the digital platform that we needed. John and Megan within the High Value Manufacturing Catapult, you know, pulling together events with a couple of hundred participants registering is never straightforward. Making sure that everybody's in the right place at the right time and covering the right subjects can be, shall we say, a fast track to going prematurely grey, but I think you achieved that really well. So thank you to you. Thank you, of course, to all of our speakers, but a particular thanks to every one of our audience who registered for the event and then stayed throughout the sessions. You know, the UKMF events happen because of the team that I've just named, but it's valuable and the events are valuable because of you and your input. Do make sure that you continue to make that input through the hot topics workshops that Sam has just outlined. Make sure that you confirm your interest. Do come back to us on the questionnaire that you will receive after this event. But for the meantime, do stay safe. Rest and enjoy Christmas, and let's come together again next year. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for your time.